is Not Sam Wrestling.
Introducing your host from New York, here is Sam Roberts.
Well, welcome with us here on Not Sam Wrestling, the man who's going to have Roman Reigns to himself at Stomping Ground over the weekend. Drew McIntyre is here. What's going on, man?
Wow, I didn't realize we were live already, but how are you?
Yeah,
we're surprised there.
Well, you know, we're always we're ready to go. You know what I'm saying? Are you? So, you know, I was thinking about your match with Roman Reigns at Stomping Ground, and I was kind of thinking about it in the context. This is a WrestleMania rematch. What was going on in your head going into WrestleMania 35? Because that match, I don't know, even a couple months removed, if people realize what a big deal that match was. I mean, really for both of you, but Roman Reigns, his big return match, it's a WrestleMania match. He's back at a time when nobody knew when or if he'd ever be back, and you're the guy who gets to have that match with him. The responsibility is kind of put in your lap. How did you feel going into the first Roman match at WrestleMania?
It was hard to put into words. Just the company and Roman himself having that kind of belief in me. To have the match with him, his first match back after his illness on the grandest stage of them all. And, you know, for me, it was such a significant match just with the journey I'd been through with obviously growing up in WWE, being released after 8 years, going away for 3 years. You know, having a lot of success outside the company, returning, and my first ever singles match at WrestleMania is against not only Roman Reigns, but Roman Reigns returning from his illness. So it was, you know, very special to both of us. And, you know, that's a night I'll never forget.
How do you?
That's for sure. It's really hard to put into words.
I'm sure, but I mean, you did a pretty good job. How do you keep your confidence in a place where you don't kind of buckle under that pressure? You know what I mean? Where you sit there and you know day in, day out, I'm worth this opportunity. I'm good enough. I'm in the place where I'm supposed to be.
I think that's the one thing now that just never gets the best of me. Like I still get, you know, the butterflies. Those will never go away. Or that's the time, you know, I'll probably retire. Mm-hmm. But just as I mentioned, the journey I've been through is pretty, you know, interesting. I don't think anyone's ever quite been through the journey I've been through and the different circumstances and situations that I've been in WWE and outside of WWE, and everything that I've been through, the ups and downs, have prepared me for every situation, including WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And there was not one doubt in my mind that I was ready for that moment. I was just, you know, very proud and privileged that the company and Roman believed in me also, as much as I believed in myself.
You know, your story really it's pretty unique in the sense that the beginning of it or in the middle of it isn't that unique in the sense that you showed up with a lot of hype in WWE. It didn't work out. You end up getting released, and it's like, well, you know, what's next for Drew McIntyre? You ended up making a huge name for yourself across the U.S. independents, the U.K. independents. You end up in Impact. You really create this whole image where people don't even think of you as the character that you left behind in WWE, but think of you as this new character and this new personality and this new being that you were after leaving WWE. When you have the opportunity to go back and you're heading into NXT, is there any part of you that is worried that you're going to end up slipping and things are going to go back to the way they were before, that once you get back to the WWE, this amazing momentum that you created for yourself outside of the WWE isn't going to be able to maintain?
No, that never crossed my mind for a second. You know, I thought about it long and hard before I made my return. Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned, you know, I was very lucky the way things worked out outside the company. And when I first got released, I sat and thought about it. And I remember telling my wife at the time, things are going to be fine. I spoke to a couple of the other guys who've been in a similar position, and they told me, once you're released, you just play the same character, and then you'll travel around. You'll make a lot of money initially, but eventually, once people are used to seeing your face, that money will come down, and you'll find a wage that you stick at, and that'll kind of be your living, playing this WWE character everyone's used to. When I heard that, I thought, that's terrible business sense. That's not what I'm going to do. I want to remake what people can be outside of WWE. I'm going to, become something bigger. I'm going to fulfill my potential. And I was very fortunate I got the platform to show the world who Drew McIntyre, Drew Galloway, truly was, and was able to build that name and show everybody when you leave the company, you truly can create something unique. And you see somebody like Cody who took it to the next level, where I'd taken it to, and it's a really cool time for wrestling. But when my Impact contract came up and my wife and I decided we weren't going to re-sign, we had to make the decision what was the next move, and there was a couple of opportunities, and perhaps, Japan is somewhere I always wanted to go. And it wasn't until I spoke to William Regal, who's a friend and mentor of mine. He told me, take the call from Triple H, have a little chat, and we had a very good conversation. And, he's been keeping tabs on me over the years, was very proud of, what I've achieved, and finally, realizing that potential they saw in me all those years ago, and, finally kind of grew up, and the boy had finally become a man. And, in that conversation, that made it very clear I want to come to NXT, and, that was his thoughts also, because of the audience there. They were aware of who I was. They were aware of Drew Galloway and the new man that I was. And that was the best way to reintroduce me to WWE. And the plan I had in my head was, go to NXT, get the opportunity to be a leader. An individual could really make a difference in NXT. It's not like WWE when the name sells it. And that's where I was going to go first. And when the time was right, I returned to Raw, and everything just went, exactly as I saw it in my head. It's crazy. It truly is a case of you put the work in and you have a vision in your head and you work hard enough, you can pull off absolutely anything. Just don't have any doubt in your mind and work as hard as you can in every area. I tell everyone that all the time right now. And I'll tell everyone right now at the beginning of the interview, when I see all these tweets out there, these negative tweets, it drives me bloody crazy. You don't understand how much it drives me crazy, because I assure you, if you're not in the company, if you're in WWE right now, you want to figure it out. Because if you do go outside the company, there is a lot of opportunity. But some people aren't willing to put in the work, and I can't guarantee you're going to be a Drew Galloway or a Cody Rhodes. So you might want to start putting the work in while you're in WWE. Stop complaining on Twitter and make it happen, because taking the Drew and Cody route doesn't work out for everybody.
Yeah, do you kind of see that, like, know that there are guys that are unhappy, or there are guys or girls that are complaining, but you know what their work ethic is, and you know that you don't understand when you leave WWE, you can be successful, but you have to do it without the machine. There's nobody behind you. There's nobody coming up with anything creative. There's nobody coming up with anything promotional. There's nobody except you representing yourself. And I would have to imagine that that's kind of what separates the men from the boys.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, when I say, what I say, the people, know who I'm talking about. You can look yourself in the mirror and you know if you're working hard, and you know if you're not giving it everything. So the people, know who I'm talking about. Basically, and there's a lot of people that are talented and do deserve more opportunities, but are those who aren't putting in the work, and maybe in their head they think, I deserve this, this, and this. And I assure you, if you go outside the company, when it's 100% on you, it becomes your life. And if you don't give it all you've got 24/7, like, I'm very lucky that I've got a very patient wife that put up with me, because I was not home for basically 3 straight years. I was on the road all the time. If you got kids, you're not going to see them. You have to dedicate your entire life to this. And that's the good thing about social media. You can take everyone on the journey. You've got to be active on the social media. You've got to keep it interesting. You can't be boring, and you've just got to, kind of reinvent the wheel, keep things interesting. And that's not very, easy, but it is very, very rewarding if you are able to pull it off, because it is all on you.
And it's pretty amazing, and it's got to feel pretty rewarding for you, because when you look at Drew McIntyre today, who's on, Raw and SmackDown, and it's the same Drew McIntyre that was on NXT before you got to the main roster. But even though you're Drew McIntyre in name, really the character is Drew Galloway. It's the character that was developed outside of the WWE. I don't see the chosen one, the original Drew McIntyre, when I watch you now. I see the guy that I saw created outside of WWE now find a place in there, which I think is even more rare for you to be able to return, but to return as this character that you created outside.
Yeah, and that's what makes it, a lot, I guess, easier for myself, and hopefully comes across to the viewer as something real, because it is pretty much Drew Galloway with the volume turned up. And that's pretty crazy to think about, just when we talk about my journey that I've been on, and that I left WWE, got the opportunity to just be myself, and then got to return to WWE and be myself. And I think that's the key everyone's got to kind of figure out. It's just like, how can you get the best version of yourself and put that on televisions. I think that's what everybody right now is just got to like work out. And people from NXT always tell them, don't forget what brought you to the dance when you come to Raw and SmackDown. A lot of people just kind of lose what made them in NXT. You know, I feel like, you know, as much as everybody reads online that you're handed these scripts and you have to say everything, you know, verbatim and word for word, and that you've got no say in who you are, that's not really true. Like, I've been kind of observing, like, what someone like a John Cena has been saying recently, that you've got to take what you're given and make it your own and put you into it. Because if you don't put you into it, it's not going to feel real to you. And if it doesn't feel real to you, it's not going to feel real to the audience. And that's what's pretty cool about right now is, like, I'm glad someone like yourself sees Drew Galloway and Drew McIntyre, because everything I'm given, I assure you, what comes on the screen, or especially promos, etc., is not exactly what was on the script. Mm-hmm. So it's up to me to figure out how I put Drew Galloway in that. How am I going to make this real to me, even if it's something that is obviously completely a story? I've got to find something real and something I can latch onto. Because if I don't latch onto it and I don't believe it, the audience don't believe it. I think everyone's got to start thinking that way. If you see the interviews with like Cena and he says those kind of things, I guess when I was younger, I would have said, oh, that's because you're John Cena.
Right.
But now as you get older, light bulbs start going off, like, and you're like, oh my God, I actually get it now. It's like when I was younger, The Undertaker, somebody would give me advice, such as when I was 23, 24, stop playing wrestler out there. I'm like, I don't understand. I'm not playing wrestler. I am a wrestler. And as you get older, the light bulb goes off. I'm out there trying to memorize moves. You take one look in my eyes. I'm clearly not in the moment. I'm clearly not feeling it. The crowd are clearly not feeling it. It took me a while before those light switches start going off. Once they start going off, that's when you start putting yourself into it. That's when you start getting over. That's when the people start believing, and that's when you finally start making money.
Do you think that that there is something to the idea of the generation, this generation, and maybe the generation before, are kind of made up entirely of guys that grew up watching wrestling? Meaning in the 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s, wrestling wasn't what it was for these guys when they were kids. You know, Stone Cold Steve Austin didn't grow up watching WWF superstars on his TV set, and Hulk Hogan certainly didn't grow up. You know, they grew up with wrestling, but it was a completely different thing. You didn't have the fandom. You didn't have the action figures. You didn't have the larger-than-life superheroes, cartoon characters, all this stuff. Now, with as much as the industry has progressed and the guys that grew up super fans like you know, becoming an age where you can actually do this for a living, do you think that it affects you when you first start wrestling? Do you think that leads to you kind of doing what The Undertaker said you were doing and playing pro wrestler as opposed to actually being a wrestler?
I think that just comes with experience. Like, to be honest, when you first start, I think everybody is just out there just worried and tense, and your body's flexed the whole time, which means you're blowing up. Your eyes are clearly not in the moment. You're deer in the headlights. You're just trying to remember the next move. I think that's more to do with experience. But it's interesting when you talk about the different generations and perhaps their mindset and their attitudes. Because, like, as you mentioned, I'm like the biggest mark of all. I talk about wrestling all day long. Like, you know, actually, I got some pretty bad family news today, as you know. I wasn't going to bring it up, but just so everyone out there knows, I'm a bit of a somber tone today. So I had some difficult news, but my wife pointed out to me, you know, the one thing that takes your mind off bad news is talking about wrestling. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today and talk about wrestling and take my mind off things going on.
Yeah, man. And I said, why don't we talk at another time? And they said, no, you know, he wants to come on and just talk wrestling for a while. And I said, yeah, I get that. I mean, that's kind of what we all have in common. When there's whatever it is going on, wrestling is the great escape for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what my wife, you know, told me. She was like, it's the one thing that's going to take your mind off it for a while. It's the one thing you're obsessed with is wrestling. But as we're talking about the different generations, I think it's interesting in the social media age today. It's weird. Like, I'm trying to think of the best way to verbalize it. I don't know if, like, we're coming across almost as, you know, like too much of the fans now as opposed to superstars. Like, some of the mystique is getting lost. And when I see, you know, some people online and posting pictures with, like, the older superstars and, you know, putting them over, that's awesome, because I want to do that.
Right.
When you put something like that out there and you present, you know, everyone else from the former generation as the bigger stars rather than yourself as the bigger stars, and hopefully I'm verbalizing this correctly. Like I think we're losing a lot of mystique these days because all of us were such super fans, but we're putting it out there to the public constantly in social media how much of super fans we are and how much we are just the same as everybody, rather than keeping a little bit of that mystique, keeping that superstar mentality, keeping that we can't quite touch this person. And that's kind of been my mentality. The best I can is keeping myself at a distance. Like at PWG, for example, you know, that was a very interactive crowd. If you've ever been to one of the shows, all the wrestlers come out, they meet with the fans, they hang out with them, they sell their t-shirts, everybody's friends. I would never come out, I would never talk to anybody. That was wanting to be the one guy that had mystique. So when I walked out, people said, oh, this feels different. Drew's different than everybody else. And I was trying to project that superstar vibe. In today's day and age, like, hopefully I'm putting this out there correctly, that I think we've got to keep that mentality of, if we keep putting the previous generations over as better than us, they're always going to see it that way, and therefore we're always going to rely on them. And I think we've got to somehow try and find a little bit of that mystique again.
Yeah, I mean, I think Seth
Rollins...
Rollins...
It's possible in today's day and age.
It is tough because, I mean, Twitter has made it so every fan has access to hit you up on your phone. You know what I mean? Like, somehow every fan in the audience is able to @mention you, and if you check your @mentions, everyone has access to you, which it never was before. I mean, I liked stuff, and it was a super controversial move on the WWE's part. I mean, some people were downright pissed at the match with you and Kurt Angle a few months ago on Raw. But I kind of love the idea that regardless of how much we respect Kurt Angle as a legend, and regardless of the fact that you as a kid probably loved Kurt Angle, that once you guys got in the ring, Drew McIntyre, the guy from Monday Night Raw, absolutely demolished and humiliated Kurt Angle. And realistically, I mean, in 2019, that's what we should be seeing, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. And someone like Kurt Angle is willing to do that for somebody like myself or somebody like Baron Corbin, help us get over. And look, that as incredible as that. And like the problem is, like somebody has a match like that. I assure you, I did not tweet after that. Thank you to my buddy Kurt for doing that for me again, as he did for me in TNA. I had my arm around him, pointing at him, like a lot of people do.
Yeah,
like that's what I'm talking about with the mystique. And it's just not good business to me. It's some of the lessons I learned outside the company was more business than anything, and a lot of it was kind of thinking, what have we lost and what's changed now, and why are things not necessarily the way they were, and as much good as there is, and as much as it's brought us all together, and there's certain circumstances where, it's really cool and should be done, it's also making people not seem as larger than life as it used to be. I can't imagine if I was tweeting back in the day and Stone Cold Steve Austin replied to me, I'd be telling everyone at school, my buddy Steve, he replied to me, one of my friends, not that out-of-reach superstar with that mystique to me anymore, because he's just replying to me on the internet or answering all my questions constantly. So yeah, I don't know, that's just things that creep into my head, and I try to think, how can I be different than everybody else, and how can I create that superstar profile, and how am I going to make people genuinely hate me in 2019 when a lot of them go, oh, I respect him in his journey, clap, clap, clap. I said, no, I don't want you to respect me in my journey. I want you to hate me. I'm a bad guy, and that's my job, to make you dislike me, and I want some truth in what I'm saying, but I want to be so truthful that you say, damn it, I hate this guy, but he's got a point.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the trick, right? Like every villain that you love in a movie, that while you hate what they're saying and you hate them for saying it, you can't call them a liar. You know what I mean? It is valid, what they're saying. You kind of have to go, like, if Drew McIntyre is announcing to the world that I'm unstoppable and I'm going to, destroy all your dreams on TV, you probably are, right?
Yeah, that's the key, is just tapping into something that people can genuinely get annoyed with. And that's, I guess, the social media thing. Whenever I get the opportunity on Raw to kind of like use that, it drives people crazy. I talk about, a lot of people just saying things for the likes and retweets, and all the fans just like going along with that, and they're just saying positive things about people they don't necessarily care about, so they get that like and get that retweet, and then the people will like it, the superstars will like it and retweet it, and it just comes across to me as, I don't know, pony. The word, just not becoming of a WWE superstar.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that part of it is that you need to have a pretty high degree of confidence to know in yourself, this is working based on the crowd reaction. I want them to hate me. They're booing me. This is working. I don't need to go on the internet and get affirmation from individual fans. I think for a lot of people, and it's not just in wrestling, I think it's, everywhere in kind of entertainment, that people now have access to affirmation from fans whenever they want it, directly. And I mean, you're right. Big picture, it hurts. Big picture, I think it does make you look like less of a star. But for a lot of people in the small picture, they just need some affirmation right now. So if I go on Twitter and I say something, I can get some fans to tell me I'm great, and then I can read that I'm great, and I'll feel better. But realistically, it doesn't mean anything, right?
100%. I get more excited about the negative comments, especially the constructive. Like sometimes, occasionally, I'll get something in there and I'll go, you know what, this person's got a point. And I appreciate the positive comments that have also got a point as well, and not just saying it to say it, like hoping for a like or a retweet. But the biggest compliment for me right now is, like, especially on Instagram, because anybody can just message you.
Yeah.
On Instagram, my wife actually runs that, and like when she tells me how many death threats I'm getting because what I do to Roman Reigns, I say, okay, excellent, I'm doing my job.
All right, we're on to something here.
Today, babe. We got about 10 today. I'm doing my job correctly.
Yeah, Tuesday morning, you're like, oh, how did it go? Only 4 death threats. I got to pick my game up a little bit. This is...
there we go. So that's what I'm going for these days. But yeah, that's just, I guess, 2019, and just try to figure it out. Because obviously when I was away from the company, social media was such a powerful tool that helped get me over, and I was able to take people on the journey. And it was, the way I framed it wasn't necessarily a case of I just go back and forth with everybody. It was more, I'm here today, this is what's going on today, Drew's in this country today, and I present it in that way more. Right. Like trying to come across, like, I guess in my mind, like as big of a star as I can, and create the kind of image I have in my head of what a superstar should be.
What was PWG like for you to show up at PWG? You know, you're a guy who really, prior to WWE, you didn't have a ton of independent experience, especially in the States, you know. So this is where you've learned how to do everything. Now you're outside of WWE. You're kind of figuring out the ropes of what wrestling looks like outside of WWE. And you show up to Reseda, California, and you've got, you know, at the time, probably the most diehard loyal fan base to a promotion anywhere. They like their wrestling a certain way. They like certain guys. You know, this is, I mean, for those of you that weren't seeing it at the time, there's no guardrails. There's literally, the fans are sitting at the ring. You're touching the apron. The fans are on top of you. It's as intimate as it gets, but it's as passionate as it gets. Is there any nervousness in you at that point in your life or in your career because you haven't had an experience quite like this?
Oh yeah, so that, I was certainly very nervous, and that was like, I looked at that of, okay, this is, you know, put up or shut up time when it comes to in-ring ability. Mm-hmm. You know, the PWG is, you know, the best of the independents, and if you get the standing ovation, the please come back after the match, after the first time you're there, that means you did well. If you don't, probably not gonna be back again. I was very fortunate when I first, you know, started working with Evolve. My very first match, I beat Chris Hero at Cassius-Ohno for the Evolve Championship, and I had the opportunity to wrestle with Roderick Strong, who's one of the best wrestlers in the world, probably one of my favorite, not my favorite opponent. And I think Trent Beretta told him, you know, Drew's actually really good. And he actually told me, Roderick's very honest. He told Roddy, he's like, Drew, that guy, he's good. And Trent assured him, no, trust me, he's actually good. He's telling me this. And at the curtain one time, because finally we had a couple of matches, they went great. He's telling me this story by the curtain after we did 2 matches, and he's telling me, yeah, that guy, and I wrestled you, and I went, yeah, you are good. Congratulations. And he pretty much said it that blunt. Yeah, thanks, buddy. But it actually meant a lot to me because I thought so much of Roddy. But he is friends with Super Dragon at the PWG, and he'd asked him, who do you think Drew should wrestle in his first match? And Roddy had suggested Mike Bailey. I'm not sure if you're aware of him. Uh-huh. But he's phenomenal Canadian wrestler. Can do pretty much anything you can possibly imagine. But Roddy suggested him as my first opponent. And we had this crazy match for about 25 minutes. Just gave it absolutely everything I could. The crowd are just out of their minds. It was so awesome. Like you say, small building, 400 people. Everyone very passionate about wrestling, very passionate about PWG. You know, they expect everything you've got. We gave them everything we had. And when the match was over, and they come up on their feet and they chanted, please come back. That's genuinely one of the best moments of my career. Thus far, to get that kind of compliment from, you know, those passionate hardcore fans. Yeah, because they would love to boo you out of the building, by the way. They would love to tell you to leave and don't come back. I mean, they'll tell you. Yeah. I got to come back a few times after, thankfully. But yeah, they'll let you know if you're not doing a good job. But that was one of the coolest moments because, again, like, there's not a lot of bigger guys that work with PWG, like myself and Chris Hero.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably the only guys over like 6 foot tall. So Brian Cage is jacked out of his mind. But generally, it's more the high flyer kind of base style, the real technical guys. You don't get a lot of big guys. So that meant the world to me, obviously, when people see me in WWE and maybe thought, well, that 3MB guy, really, he's going to walk into PWG and blow our minds.
Yeah.
The mentality people had at first. And I was like very, fortunate and very happy the way things worked out. And to get that affirmation from the crowd really is one of the proudest moments of my career.
How quick into that first PWG match do you realize, oh my God, this is going to work. This is going to be great?
It wasn't long into it. Like once I started laying in the chops and throwing Mike around, they were getting into it. And I just remember as the near falls started escalating and escalating, they kept coming up and up and up. And I knew we're just getting started. I went, wow, we've really got them right now. And I know we're just getting to the good stuff. And when you're in a match and you feel that and you're feeling it, they're feeling it, there's like no other feeling in the world like it. And I remember that was probably the first time outside the company I was in a match and I genuinely started, like I'm really feeling it right now. I'm starting to, all the lessons I've been taught in WWE, but I was never able to put into practice. When I was gone from the company, I was finally putting them into practice. And in that match, there's certain things people had said over the years, like the Undertaker's advice, etc. And you're in the moment, you're feeling it, and just letting the crowd breathe and giving them that time to react to the first thing before moving on to the next thing. And it just all, was going through my head during that match. And I remember afterwards being like, all right, this is it. I'm putting the pieces together finally. And just to spend another next couple of years putting those pieces together of everything I learned in my first run in WWE before I, became the hopefully future main event superstar that I plan to be.
That's amazing. And I mean, yeah, I would say you're pretty. If you're not a main event superstar already, you're fairly close. Your second pay-per-view match with Roman Reigns, this year. I think you're doing okay. What do you?
All right, then I get some big goals.
Yeah. What do you?
The first British champion, I've got my eyes on that title.
What do you think of this theory about the NXT call-ups? A lot of times you see guys in NXT and the NXT fans who, I would say the NXT fans aren't that, and it's ironic because it's a WWE product, but they're not that dissimilar from like the PWG fans. The NXT fans are super loyal. They're super passionate. I don't know if you saw the takeover from Hartford. I think it was Takeover 25, the last one, but it was.
Oh, yeah.
It was so loud. The entire show was just so loud. Everybody on fire the whole time. But NXT fans, one of the things that they always say when somebody starts to get over super big in NXT is, I hope they don't go to the main roster because the main roster is going to ruin them. And they start bringing up guys that were big in NXT, and then they get to the main roster, and it doesn't pan out for them. I feel like, and maybe it's because that narrative is a little bit more convenient when you're talking about the negative side of it, because you don't really hear the success stories. The Drew McIntyres, for instance. Like, you go from being NXT champion to going on to the main roster and, not missing a step, really. What is it? How do you succeed in that transition, and why do you think it hasn't worked for some people?
I think I mentioned earlier, the one bit of advice I always give any NXT guy or girl that asks me what I need to do different, I always say that just don't lose what brought you to the dance. Look at the nature of NXT and Raw and SmackDown are obviously very different. Mm-hmm. So you're going to get more time in NXT, and it's not quite like Raw and SmackDown, where a lot of the matches are kind of commercials for the characters or commercials for the future pay-per-view, and you're looking to tell a story, and sometimes a short story. But you've got to be able to figure out, okay, at NXT I'm going to have 30 minutes. It's easy to tell the story in 30 minutes. But can you do that? Like, how good are you really? Are you able to tell that story in 5 minutes? Are you able to keep what brought you from NXT to Raw or SmackDown? With you, are you going to tell you, okay, now you were a good guy there, you're going to be a bad guy? And suddenly you just start panicking and people are in your ear giving advice. So you're just going to suddenly change everything and try and please everybody? Or are you going to figure out what brought you to the dance? You're going to figure out how to tell that story you want to tell and get yourself over. So if you remember, I was a good guy in NXT. Mm-hmm. And I came to Raw and I was a bad guy. Mm-hmm. And I assure you, like Drew McIntyre from NXT and Drew McIntyre on Raw, on Raw. And SmackDown right now, I don't even know which brand I'm on.
You're on both shows. I don't remember half the time myself.
Yeah, I've called myself the wild card, Drew McIntyre. But if you watch the difference between the two, there really isn't much difference, except McIntyre's maybe willing to back off or cheat a little bit. But I'm essentially the same guy when I'm doing the promos, the same, intensity in the ring. Good guy McIntyre's willing to headbutt you, like he's willing to bring the fight, and bad guy McIntyre's willing to do exactly the same. Like, I didn't change anything about me.
Right.
And that's what I try to, tell people is you just can't lose. What got you over with those NXT fans? You can get over with those fans, or those almost hardcore fans. You can get over with anybody. Just don't lose what made the NXT fans believe in you and got you over in the first place. You just got to figure out, how can you tell those, to get your character over and tell those stories sometimes in a shorter period, because Raw and SmackDown is generally a commercial for you to set up your big match of the pay-per-view. You can do what you were doing in NXT.
Well, is it poetic to be able to kick the crap out of Heath Slater on Raw this week?
Oh, yeah. See, I can be kind of honest on this thing. Like, I'll never be tweeting about this stuff. But when I heard about it, I initially said, man, I genuinely feel bad. This is going to be great. I was like, what a dick move. And just the way it kind of came together, and like Heath is so sympathetic to begin with, and people, thankfully, so I could hear the crowd from where we were filming. Thankfully, I think a bunch of them kind of understood our past relationship, and if they didn't, hopefully we played it that way. Again, with Heath being so sympathetic, and like it was just like it wasn't all necessarily planned. Like the interaction with us, when I'm reaching for the money, and he's trying to stop me, and the banter back and forth. That was just going with the flow. Like I'm saying, you don't have to learn those words all the time. Just go with how it feels. And Heath and I genuinely have a relationship, and I genuinely know his family, and we're trying to put that into the moment. And when I tried to get the money, he stopped me and bent over. And I was like, here we go. I was just like, in the moment I kind of lost my head, but afterwards I was like, wow, that was pretty fun. I think there's mileage for that down the line. And I think it'd be good for Heath and good for myself if we do have a little program down the line.
Yeah, I think it'd be amazing. Do you feel like you've gained patience over the years as you've gained experience, in the sense that I would imagine that for some in your position, you might start to get impatient, in the sense that even though you're in an amazing spot right now, and you got the match with Roman Reigns, and you had your WrestleMania match, and things are clearly going really well, like you said earlier, you got these big goals. You want to be the guy. You want to be the Universal Champion, the WWE Champion, whatever title it is. Is it easier now for you to say, you know what, I'm doing excellent work, I'm just going to keep doing excellent work and we'll get there? Or do you still have your moments where you're like, how long is it going to take for me to be in that spot?
Yeah, I'm certainly way more patient than I used to be, especially during the first run and the Chosen One and IC champion stuff. I was very impatient, and it was a case of, oh my God, why is it not happening right now, and being very verbal about that. And I think a lot of fans are like that these days. They need everything right now. They don't understand why things are happening the way they're happening. But the truth is, we have 52 weeks of TV every single year. And, obviously I'd love to just jump in and be champion right away. But the truth is, are the casual fans going to really accept that? Or is Drew McIntyre, is that going to be as successful as it could be if I, do what I've been doing and, take my time and slowly build that character? And, I've been around, I guess factions, if you like. I was with Dolph. And there was a lot of time with Corbin and Lashley, and then we set up the match with Roman, and now obviously with Shane. But I look at it as, okay, that's, just I've been in prominent positions, I've been in prominent matches, I've had the opportunity to slowly build that character, get people to know who Drew McIntyre truly is, while, not taking many significant losses aside against like a Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. And I look at it like this is a good thing. It takes a long time to truly get over, and I do not want to jump straight into, that title picture until I'm absolutely at the point where I know the fans know exactly who I am. I feel like the fans are ready for this, and they're going to accept this, and they're going to boo me out the damn building when it happens, and people are going to see somebody kick my ass and pay money to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, if the road that you've been on teaches you anything, I would imagine it'd be timing. Like, you just have to understand that sometimes that things happen at specific times when they're supposed to kind of happen.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Everything happens for a reason. Sometimes in the moment, you don't feel that way, and I felt that way many times. But the trick is, you just gotta, keep pushing forward. That's sometimes the hardest thing, is don't be negative, and certainly don't put out to the world or tell your significant other, tell your close friends. Like, don't mouth it off in the locker room. Certainly don't put it on social media. But the key is just never giving up.
Yeah.
Because I guess that my career is just proof of, like, no matter what, no matter how low things can get, no matter how 3MB things can get, if you work hard enough, that you can come back and you can be on top.
Yeah, man. Before I let you go, I know you can't, nobody ever really talks about it because you can't divulge what actually happens. But as somebody who's not as somebody who grew up a wrestling fan, but more somebody who, as a wrestler, is obsessed with the business as you are, how amazing was it to be a part of Shawn Michaels' classes at the Performance Center?
That's the best. Of course, I've said this many times, the first rule about Shawn classes, you don't talk about Shawn classes. I don't go into the details, but, you know, that was a huge part of, you know, like the finishing school, if you like. I always refer to it as getting my PhD. I was working with Shawn just because there's nobody like him. The majority of guys that ever reached his success either, you know, made their money and they're not part of the business anymore. Perhaps they're not, unfortunately, with us anymore. There's the fact that Shawn Michaels is willing to move with his family to Orlando and work with everybody, and the level he got to with, you know, the best in-ring performer of all time is absolutely insane. And when you have a conversation with him and you see exactly the level he thinks on, it's just, you know, it's unbelievable. Like, you know, like some days you just sit there, you forget you're with, you know, wait a minute, I'm sitting here with Shawn Michaels, and you know, everyone around me is like, I don't know, this is in the class, but everyone around me is such an insanely talented class, and we're just going back and forth, just having this incredible, like, experience with the greatest of all time. And that truly was, like, getting my PhD as far as I'm concerned, and kind of what set me up perfectly for coming back to Raw, because the time I was out with my bicep injury, I was driving back and forth to Orlando to make sure I worked with Shawn, because if I couldn't do it physically, I was certainly going to work mentally.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, look, I could literally talk to you for hours about this stuff, because I'm in the same camp as you. I could talk about wrestling all day, every day, and still want to do it some more. But I'll let you go. You got Stomping Ground, of course, Sunday on the WWE Network. I would hope by now you all have the WWE Network, but if you don't, get it. You watch Stomping Ground on Sunday night. If you're in the area, go get your tickets. And you can see Drew McIntyre give Roman Reigns the beating of a lifetime.
You're right. So everyone stop being so bloody negative about it. I assure you. Like, everyone's going out there to kill it. Just sit down, enjoy the show. And I guarantee you, Roman and I will get a match everyone's going to be talking about.
Yeah, if you take a second to enjoy it, WWE and wrestling in general, it's a pretty fun show. You know, it's wrestling. It's the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, it's just be a fan. I can imagine being younger and just complaining about everything. I just used to sit down and watch everything, every possible company you can imagine.
Yeah.
Even the worst of the independents. I got, you know, tape trading and watching absolutely everything I get my hands on. I was certainly not being a critic. I was just sitting back, being a fan and enjoying the show. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a good message for everybody. Thanks a lot, man, for taking the time out to talk. It was great.